Housing ministers from across the continent have designed a 40-year plan of action to invest in affordable housing initiatives across the continent. Now, that resolution was made at the end of the Shelter Afrique General Assembly in the city of Yaounde in Cameroon. Those at the four-day event agreed to enhance mechanisms for the mass production of decent and affordable housing in the continent. They also agreed to set up mechanisms to make it a lot easier to provide cheaper, long-term sources of funding. Most African countries are still struggling to deal with the housing crisis. The housing supply deficit in Nigeria, for example, is estimated at 17 million units. Africa's largest oil producer has just over 535,000 mortgage accounts. That's less than a third of the total in South Africa, which has a population a third the size of Nigeria's. So let's explore this topic in a bit more detail. Jonathan Ofe answers, the publisher at Africa Briefing magazine. He joins us on the program from London. Thank you for your time this evening, sir. So when we speak of housing, access to affordable financing is often cited as one key problem. Nigeria, for instance, population of nearly 200 million, just under 535,000 mortgage accounts. But is this the right way to think about the financing problem? Is mortgage scarcity really an accurate reflection of the financing problem?
Yes, it is a very accurate reflection of the problem, because the majority of Africans, are low income, belong to low income families. Okay, and those who can afford mortgages are those in the middle income and upwards group. So when it comes to mortgage affordability of outright housing, it becomes a big problem for most Africans. So I believe the governments need to formulate good policies to provide affordable housing for the mass majority of the people, especially those in the urban areas.
Yeah, we've seen in some instances countries like Kenya, for example, providing mortgage refinancing facilities to try and lower the cost of these debt facilities. Do we need to see a lot more of that across Africa?
Yes, we need to see a lot more. But number one, how does the average African, the average worker, assess a mortgage from a bank or a mortgage broker or from a housing company? It is difficult. I mean, there are so many factors that prohibit the majority of Africans from accessing mortgages to own their own homes. So I mean, the problems are myriad that the governments in Africa need to sit down, examine the problem, and find the right solutions to suit everybody.
To what extent, though, might building standards also be part of the problem? Because if we're saying that we want to expand accessibility to housing, but then at the same time we say that a house, by definition, by law, must be something built, say, out of concrete and bricks, materials that may essentially be out of reach for many people, aren't we just making it more difficult, making this affordable housing dream essentially a mirage?
That's a good question. Look, I mean, when we talk about housing, I mean, Africans or governments need to be very innovative. To own a house, to build a house, you don't necessarily, like you said, it shouldn't be built from bricks or mortar or concrete or whatever. There are new innovations coming up that African governments, African businesses, African housing companies need to assess and harness to be able to. I mean, I read about 20 years ago, someone went to Ghana, where I come from originally, using laterite, to build houses. Laterite without much cement, with a little cement component to build houses. And the laterite, when it's used, I mean, laterite is very common and very cheap in Africa. So laterite, when it's used, to build a house, you wouldn't even need air conditioners, in those buildings. So these are some of the innovative things that African governments, housing companies need to look at and explore to the benefit of the majority of Africa.
All right, one last question for you, sir. So to what extent is affordable access to land just as much a barrier to getting as many people into affordable homes?
Land is a problem. I mean, let me use Ghana where I come from, my country. I mean, the land tenure system is a bit it's a bit cumbersome, for lack of a better way. Okay, and look, when you go to the Ghana capital Accra, there are so many instances where a plot of land could be sold to multiple people. Okay. In Accra, in Ghana, we have something called the land guards, who I mean, whose sole purpose is to guard lands from being encroached and so on and so forth. So again, governments need to come up with the right policies, to make sure that number one, the traditionally owned lands owned by the traditional authorities, are made more accessible. Again, lands owned by the government are also well demarcated, well processed, and to be made accessible to to people, so that land is not, one piece of land is not sold to multiple people, so on and so forth.
Indeed, quite a bit of work to be done as far as cracking that affordable housing problem is concerned. Thank you for your time this evening. Jonathan Ofei, publisher at the Africa Briefing magazine.